that you can usually build your business to $100,000 a year, and honestly, beyond that, with it just being you. Well, hey there, my friends. Welcome back to the podcast. This is going to be podcast episode 513. That's a lot of episodes, Jen. I have done a lot of episodes. I'm going to chat with you today about the three biggest mistakes that business owners make when they're trying to get past $100,000 a year. Okay. And the reason I'm going to do this episode is I did some stories on Instagram this week, and I said, tell me what your biggest challenge is if you're already an entrepreneur making over six figures, which I was glad to see so many of you who are following me are. And your biggest challenge for the majority of you was time, followed up by, that you need some systems, which by the way is very much related to you don't have enough time because you have a lack of systems. Okay. And the other thing that I suggested was, is it that that you need to hire people? And so I'm going to talk just a little bit about the feedback on those stories, and then the three things that I see entrepreneurs doing. And as a reminder, at this point, we're nearing 25,000 women that I've coached in the last decade. I've helped so many women get to the $100,000 a year. I've helped a much smaller group, but there are a group of people who I've helped to get to the over seven-figure a year mark. And so it's very possible, but you do have to just think differently. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. Okay. The biggest mistake that I often see when an entrepreneur is, they get to $100,000 a year and they're trying to get beyond that, right? Because once you get to that level, by the way, something kind of shifts in your brain. It's like, oh, how do I describe it? It's like when you get to 100,000, suddenly you're like, anything's sticking possible here, folks. Like, look at me go. It's like your first goal as a business owner, I think, should be to get to $100,000 a year. But then what happens is sometimes you'll get there and you'll stay stuck for several years because you can't do the same things that you did to get to 100,000 to get to your next goal, which I think should be 500,000. I think it should be 500,000 should be your next goal. And so what oftentimes people will do is they'll be like, okay, this is what I did and I got to 100,000. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to offer a bunch more things, because a bunch more things is going to create a bunch more money. And actually the opposite of that is true. When you're trying to scale from 100,000 to whatever your next goal is, you shouldn't be adding more products, more offers, more packages, because that will often just dilute a lot of things. It will dilute your current offerings. It will also a lot of times confuse your clients and your audience. Usually, successful entrepreneurs, get to that $500,000 point, they are scaling one thing really, really well. They're focusing on, improving the pricing, maybe adding some VIP options or something, which is not a new product, just adding some other things. They're really focused on their marketing. If they spend this much on a Facebook ad, can they get this many more sales every month? They're focused on their conversions. They're focused on what they already did to get to $100,000. How can they just optimize that? How can they refine that? How can they make that better? How can they add to that? Not adding more things. Does that make sense? And so if you are at the $100,000 point and you're like, I want to get to 500,000, Jen. Okay. So think about what got you to where you're at. And then I know that the saying is what got you here won't get you there. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But in terms of trying to scale to 500,000, don't create a bunch more things. Just figure out how can you, the thing that's already sold, because if you got to 100K, you got something that's working, baby. So how can you just make that better? How can you get that thing in front of three times as many people, five times as many people? How can you get that thing, inch up the price a little bit, add some things to that to make it worth more, launch it a couple more times this year? But that's going to be the key. Okay. So that's mistake number one I see is entrepreneurs, a lot of times they'll just add more things, thinking it'll be more money. And it actually is more confusion, more work. Okay. Mistake number two is often that you can usually build your business to $100,000 a year. And honestly, beyond that, with it just being you. You can do everything yourself for a little while. Okay. I think I was probably at about $300,000 a year when I was like, I need some help. And I wish that I would have done it so much sooner. I did do a podcast a while back and I talked about how that you need to hire somebody when you run out of time or you run out of talent. And people are like, wait, huh? And I'm like, you're going to get to a point in your business where there's just some things you don't know how to do. You don't know how to do them. And you can either force yourself to like sit down and try to learn a new thing, or you can just hire somebody to do it for you. Or you'll get to a point in your business where you run out of time. There's not enough hours in the day. If you find yourself being someone who says, I need a mini me, there's not enough hours in a day, I feel like a hamster on a wheel, those are all signs that it is time for you to hire somebody. Okay. So the mistake I see people doing is they think, okay, I've made it to 100,000. I can make it to my next goal with it just being me also. And you might be able to, but not without a lot of burnout, not without a lot of stress, not without your family starting to really resent what it is that you're trying to build. And, you can get to six figures with it just being you, but to get past that, you've got to start shifting your thinking into terms of like, yes, you can do it all, but you can't scale that. There's no way you can scale that. I don't know anybody who got to $500,000 a year without having some other people helping them. Now, listen, a lot of times, instantly entrepreneurs are like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to hire. And I'm like, dude, chill or do that. We're not talking about a full-time person. We're not talking about a full team, but you've got to hire some contractors. Okay. Just hire some people on a contract basis to help you. VAs. Hire a virtual assistant who can start with 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, taking care of your inbox, etc. Get some strategic support. Hire a coach who can help get you some shortcuts. But if you continue to think that you're going to do all of the things, you will be the bottleneck in your business, okay? And you will get burned out. You'll be exhausted. And a lot of times, this is when entrepreneurs are like, you know what, this is too much stinking work. I became an entrepreneur so I could work less, and instead I'm working double. Welcome to being an entrepreneur, folks. So, listen, the sooner you get some help and stop that, I've got to do it all myself thinking, the quicker you can grow to that $500,000 a year. And I can tell you that in my painting company, my first year of owning a painting business, and I started painting in 1999. I think in the year 2000 is when I officially got, the magic brush as my painting company. I'll never forget when my friend Lisa, I was like, can you help me do taxes after that year? So, it was the year 2000 that I had a full year where I was tracking my revenue, saving receipts, all those things. And Lisa's like, sure, I can help you. And she's like, how much, so this would have been like in the spring of 2001, because 2000 was my first year of working as a business and I had to do taxes. Okay. So I know this was 24 years ago, but I remember my friend Lisa was going to help me with taxes because I'd never done them myself, especially not for a business. And she's like, okay, so what was your revenue last year? And I said, it was 90. And she said, 9. And I go, no, 90,000. And she's like, 90,000. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, oh, I thought you meant like 9,000. And I'm like, no, I made $90,000 my first year as a painting company. My first year, friends, and made my first hire that next year in 2001, because I couldn't do it all myself. I couldn't do all the marketing, pick up all the, supplies, meet with all of the builders, meet with all the homeowners, and work in people's houses and paint all day long. So when I switched over to full-time coaching, which I really need to just figure out the year that I was, or not full-time coaching, but I was running the painting company and coaching both. It was either 10 or 12 years ago. So let's just say 2015 for an easy number. Okay. I made my first $100,000 as a coach. So aside from the painting company, as a coach in 14 months, and immediately was hiring contractors, VAs, somebody to do my website. Immediately got a coach because I knew that I wouldn't be able to grow much past that. There's so many things I didn't know how to do. So I was running out of talent and I just didn't have enough time. I'm still running a painting company. I'm trying to build the coaching business. And so, time, I hate that saying, time is money or whatever, but it really is. I did not want to waste any time going from $100,000 to $500,000 a year. So get yourself some help. Stop doing everything yourself. Okay. Mistake number 3 is launching things without any sort of a strategy. So a lot of times you can kind of stumble your way into a $100,000 a year business, or you can kind of throw a whole lot of spaghetti at the wall and hit $100,000 and you're like, oh my gosh, That was brilliant. That was amazing. And I think sometimes that happens just like so accidentally that you become like this accidental entrepreneur. You hit these like great revenue, thresholds and you think to yourself, I didn't even know what I was doing. Okay. That can happen. But to scale past that, you can't continue down that path. Now we have to get some strategy because when you're really random, then you're going to get really inconsistent results. And I know plenty of people who've had $100,000 a year and then the next year it was like 60. They've had $100,000 and come to me for coaching and, they have the next, because the next year they like went backwards and they're wanting to get back up past $100,000 again. And you have to have some sort of strategic plan, especially if you're somebody who's launching. So if you're launching a paid group or a paid course or any sort of a consulting package, or you're launching a book or you're launching a new product, you can't just be willy-nilly because throwing spaghetti against the wall is an exhaustive strategy. And by the way, it's not a strategy. Throwing spaghetti at the wall is the opposite of having a strategy. And so if you're going to go past $100,000 a year, you've got to get strategic. You have to launch things with some sort of a calendar, with a plan, with a process that is repeatable. Because there used to be a time when we would launch my course, which was called Creators Roadmap back in the day, once a year. We'd have a $500,000 launch, a $600,000 launch, a $750,000 launch, and that would be great. But we got to where we're like, well, if we can make $750,000 launching once a year, could we make 1.5 million if we launched twice a year? Okay, what would happen if we launched 3 times a year? Okay, what would happen if we launched once a quarter? And so you don't want to like reinvent the wheel every time. You need a launch calendar, like a process. You need something that you can do like, regularly and not have to go back and be like, okay, now what were the emails that I sent again? Okay, now what did I post on social? You don't want to do that. You need and you need some time where you like warm up your audience. They know a launch is coming. You've got a date on the calendar. You're not just like, hey, I think I need some extra money all of a sudden, so I'm going to launch on Sunday. That's never going to work. That strategy is not going to work. It maybe work to get you at 100K. It's not going to work to keep you there or to get you beyond that. So there are things that have to be congruent and work together. Your messaging on social media, your sales mechanism. Like, are you going to use a webinar, or are you going to use a podcast series to get people ready for your launch? Are you going to do a 3-day workshop? Something like that. It's anymore. People need warmed up, and they need warmed up several times before they're actually going to buy. And so you've got to have the messaging, the sales mechanism, the content, like all working congruently in order to have a launch that's actually going to be profitable and scalable. And so, scaling requires that you figure out some things in your business that are repeatable. They are possibly, strategic. They are looking at a calendar and see, where your launches fit in. What worked well last time that you want to still do and double down on, but what this time where you're like, that didn't work so great, so I'm going to cut that out. Like that is how you're going to scale, by being very strategic in your launches, not just like, throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping. Hoping is not a good strategy. Okay. So listen, I want you to think, if you're at the $100,000 mark and you're like, I really want to scale this year, Jen, how can you simplify and optimize what offers you already have? How can you shift your thinking from I've got to do it all to no, I'm going to invest. Okay. And we're going to say vest, because sometimes people are like, I'm just going to throw money out the window by paying for help. Nope. You're going to invest in being able to scale by investing in people to help you. Again, whether it's part-time, contractors, VAs, support, coaches, whatever. Okay. What kind of a system can you really figure out in terms of launching so that it's structured? It's not random, but you're going to be able to repeat it. Can you get really clear on where you fit in the market? Like, what is your positioning? Is your pricing accurate? Are you able to execute things strategically instead of just winging it in 2025? Because I will tell you that I have had years where I did a lot of winging it, and those were not my most profitable years. The most profitable years were where there was actually a strategy. And I want you to always be thinking of building your business in terms of like long-term growth and not just like short-term hustle, because hustle can only take you so far. Hustle will exhaust you. It'll frustrate you. You're going to wonder why in the heck you're even doing this. Is it too much work? And a lot of times it is. So don't be relying on hustle because that'll get you to 100K, but it won't keep you there and it won't get you to a 500,000. All right. And so, my final thought is this: sometimes you really have to like almost slow down for a few minutes so that you can speed up. And I'm not talking about, a year of slowing down. I'm not talking about going way backwards in revenue, but I am talking about like doing some things where you're very intentional and you're very thoughtful so that you can really figure out like what you need to implement, who you need to hire a partner with. What do you need to do to be able to get to that next level? Because it's going to require that you think through it and you think like an entrepreneur and you're strategic in it. Okay. So if this is a topic that you're like, more of this, Jen, please, Jen, more of this. I am going to be doing, I am doing a webinar for you. If you want to go to jenniferallwood.com/webinar, and this is specifically for those of you business owners who are at the $100,000 a year mark. You can go to jenniferallwood.com/webinar and sign up. But I am going to go way further into the strategy needed to get to a 500,000 a year from 100K. And I want to just give you some more specific advice, take a little more time with you than what I can on this podcast episode. If this was useful for you, if it was valuable for you, will you do me a hot solid and just forward this to a couple other business owners who are at the 100K or above mark every year? This may be great information for them as well. And just know that it is a quick leap. I went from 100K year to about a 300K year in nanoseconds, and then from 300K to 600K very quickly. And then I went from 600K to 2 million a year back in 2018 in a 10-day period. And so when you put the right strategies into place and the right people into place and you change your thinking about your business, anything is possible. So I want to help you with that. I'll see a bunch of you in the webinar. Thanks for being here today, friends. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. How'd I do, Easton? How's the lipstick? How's the turtleneck? I feel like I was still not quite centered and I needed to be like here.